One thing I wanted to do that I think would be very, very different, and I've never really seen it done before at a conference, was to kind of give a keynote talking through what inspired me to get to this theme, right? And so I'm going to tell you guys a story and take you on a journey. And it's a very personal journey, but it's also a journey that represents the theme of the conference. And, you know, it was just about a little over 4 years ago that really no one in the software testing industry knew my name or knew about me. And actually, they really didn't even know about Ultimate Software, which is the company that I came to work for. And I look at that now and I look at today, and it's quite different. You know, I've traveled all over the world, and I've gone places, and I've met people that, you know, later on I see their posts on social media and like, today was the best day of my life, I got to meet Tariq King. And I'm like, what is going on? The world must be upside down. And now the community also knows about Ultimate Software. And I really wanted to share a little bit about that journey, because to me, my background was a little bit different. I actually started off in academia, which is why no one in the software testing industry would really know me. And I was a professor for a few years. And then I made the decision to come out of academia and join the software industry. And as you can imagine, there was a lot of doubt, a lot of worry, a lot of fear built inside. Like, would I be good enough for this job? You know, here I am going into a company and I don't have much industry experience. I think I worked for IBM for a few months as a part of an internship, but I really didn't have a lot of experience. But I was going into this because of my background and my doctorate. I was going into this as a test architect, so a relatively senior person. But I wasn't senior in the company. I was just senior on paper, right? And, you know, I think we all have a little bit of imposter syndrome when you start to think about it. And I remember sitting in my new hire orientation, listening to our CTO at the time, Adam Rogers, now our co-CTO. And going into Ultimate was great. They have a good culture, people first culture. But I was more concerned about my career move, right? Like, it's great, I want to be happy at work, that's all fine. But did I make the right career move after spending so long studying the field of software testing and now moving into this company? And at the time, Adam presented something that I thought was quite remarkable. He presented this equation during our new hire orientation. And mind you, this wasn't a new hire for just engineers. This was a general new hire for anyone who joined the company. And he comes up and he presents this equation that Q equals P. So I guess you're wondering what this stands for. Q stands for what? Quality. There we go. But what's the P? Profit? No. People? No. Productivity. Quality equals productivity. And as we know from our basic mathematics, I know we don't like math sometimes, but we always know that whatever happens on one side of an equation happens to the other side. So that means that if quality increases, what he was saying is that from his perspective and from the perspective of his leadership team, productivity also increases. On the converse, if it goes down, then productivity declines. And when he said that, I said, I know that I've joined the right company. Because usually half the battle is actually trying to convince management and trying to give them that perspective, that value on what we do and what we bring to the table. And if the CTO is proclaiming this at new hire orientation to everyone that comes in the company, whether you're a developer, tester, marketing, it doesn't matter, then I feel like that's half of the battle there. And so the story that I'm going to tell you is really going to start with inspire. And because inspiration is one of those things that is sort of like a drop in water that has this ripple effect that goes for miles and miles. And so it was about 4 years in, 3 to 4 years into my tenure at Ultimate, and I had been a test architect for a while, and I had got to a point where I felt comfortable doing what I was doing. And all of a sudden, I got an invite to go to the Boca Beach Resort, or Boca Beach Club. And it was like one of those situations where I wasn't quite sure why I got invited, because I was still a test architect. I wasn't a leader of any sort. So I get in my car and I drive from Western Florida up to the Boca Beach Resort, and just about a 45-minute drive, not a big deal. But I really didn't have very many expectations. I just felt like, okay, let's go and see what's gonna go on. I get there, it's a beautiful resort, so that's great. I mean, we're in South Florida, so you have to enjoy that while you can. I used to live in Fargo, North Dakota, so I know a little bit about climate change. And as we get there, Adam and his CSO, Julie, are just introducing the retreat. Apparently this resort was someplace that they went to for a long time. Adam's family used to go there as a child, and I was just pretty excited. Like, here I am hanging out with the CTO and all the big guys, but I still didn't know why I was there, right? Like, I just couldn't figure it out. But they were having a leadership summit. And part of that leadership summit was really about inspiring us as what I didn't know was upcoming leaders. They were looking towards me to become a manager in this company. And I don't know about you guys, but at that time, like, I felt like being an architect, that was a beautiful thing, because I got to tell people what to do and stuff, and I had power, but I didn't have to worry about all the other problems that come along with being a people manager, right? I didn't have to worry about your personal life and your PTO and your illnesses and all this stuff. So I was like, I don't know about this leadership thing, and then I was like worried, the technical side that I love and all the testing practices, is that stuff gonna go away? And there was just a lot of stuff going through my mind. But something cool happened, something very cool happened there that I couldn't anticipate. How many people have heard of right to left thinking? Have you ever heard of that? Right to left, a few people? So this was one of the things that they brought at that leadership summit. And what happens is that, like, normally we think about things from left to right. In other words, like, if we're over here, we're in our past, and we kind of walk towards the future thinking about our past to make decisions and trying to help us guide our future, right? We think about our past experiences, and really and truly what that leads to is a little bit of guidance by fear, right? Like, we think about our past, and then the bad things that happen, you don't want to make those mistakes again, and you're kind of focused on that past. But this idea was, instead of thinking left to right, let's start in the future, right? Let's start in the future and imagine that future. Pretend that we are already standing in that future, and let that feeling, like that we've conquered whatever it is we're trying to reach, guide and motivate our actions. So instead of letting the past dictate, you let that promise of that future, pretend that you've attained that future, and then go from there, and then let the rest unfold. So this blew my mind. I never thought about this before, never heard about it. I thought it was great. And I'm a movie fan, so to me it was just like, okay, let's get in the car. Let's get in the car and go to the future. And my boss came and asked me a little bit about what I thought testing was going to be like in the future. And I said, well, you know what? I think in the future, those machines that we have, the software that we have, is going to be able to test itself, and we won't have to do a lot to get it all validated and get our quality practices going, which means that we would become very, very efficient. Because we all know that testing and quality engineering accounts for about 50 to 70% of the cost of development. It's like the most expensive part of development, right? And if the machines are testing themselves, then great. So I had to basically imagine myself in that future where the machines are already doing that, and then try to let that feeling drive and guide my actions, right? And so I did what I called going back to the future, right? In other words, I went way forward, and then I said, let me go 2 steps back to the future, still future, and kind of feel what was happening at that moment, which was 2018, right? Because it was 2015 at the time, so I was still in the future. And started thinking, like, a lot of this stuff that I had been studying, because when I was in graduate school, I studied and focused on trying to build systems that can test themselves. And there's a lot of challenges with that type of a system. And at the time, there was just no great solution. But lo and behold, this whole idea of artificial intelligence and machine learning, we start to see some breakthroughs. And therefore, some of those breakthroughs allowed us to really step into that future and realize some of those challenges and overcome them. And so my whole thing to my boss, my pitch, was that we already have self-testing software, because software is smarter. It can configure itself, it can heal itself, it can protect itself, but to be able to do all that stuff, it needs to be able to test itself, right? Because that's very dynamic behavior. And we've built these agents, these bots, that can go along and do testing by themselves. Now, I didn't know why my boss was asking me this, but this is what I came up with, and I came back to him with. And so, 2016 hits, and Ultimate Software wanted to invest in the future of testing. I mean, that was exciting. But again, I felt that that stemmed from our culture, that Q equals P. What a great culture to have, that here's a company saying, we don't just want to invest in quality now, we want to invest in quality in the future. And right now, testing is very focused on doing manual things, right? We have this manual effort. We talked about it last year, where we're doing a lot of either manual exploratory testing, where the human is involved, or even when we talk about automation, we're doing this scripting, but it's all very manual. It's not very automated at all. And so let's have a grand vision where we're focused on testing with minimal human intervention. You see, I was inspired by that discussion on right-to-left thinking. I was thrilled. And now, everything that I learned in that workshop was coming into fruition in my role as a test architect. I had forgotten all about this manager thing that maybe might happen. I was just happy to be applying what I learned at this leadership summit to my field, right? And so we went on a moonshot. We got money to shoot for the moon. We got money to try to have a team focused on trying to solve this testing problem. It sounds very crazy because it is. That's why you call it a moonshot. And whenever you go on a mission like this, the first thing that you wonder is there anyone else going to the moon with me? Like, is anyone else shooting for the moon? And so, as a good doctoral student would, I remembered my roots. I was always going to have that with me. I said, well, before we start doing anything, let's search and see who's doing what. And so I found some companies. And this is nothing against these companies, but at the time, the more I talked to them about this stuff, it just seemed like they didn't understand some of the core challenges of testing that needed to be solved to do a moonshot project like this. And if you didn't understand the problem, how were you going to solve it? And so I was really disappointed when I started. This is 2016. They had some startups. Here we were trying to do this as part of our HR company, because we build HR software. We don't sell testing tools. And I really couldn't find anyone who had made this a business venture that seemed like they really knew what they were talking about. And so I walked away from there disappointed, but you got to go back into the real world, because just because you get to do a moonshot project doesn't mean that you don't need to keep the lights on, correct? And so when I came back down to earth, the company